Welcome back to Dinar Trend Tracker channel. For many years, the Iraqi dinar has been a topic of intense discussion, hope, and often frustration for a global community of note holders. Millions of individuals who acquired this currency over the past 2 decades have been waiting for a decisive moment that would legitimize their holdings in the eyes of major financial institutions. Now, a development is reportedly unfolding that signals a significant change in the way the world's leading banks are interacting with it. Appears that major financial players in the United States, specifically Wells Fargo, Chase, and Bank of America, are making shifts in policy to accept and process Iraqi dinar notes, including the widely held 25,000 denomination. This is not being presented as a mere speculation or a brief isolated test. It is being described as a real documented and potentially change in the operating procedures of some of the most prominent financial institutions on the planet, regarding one of the most closely watched currencies in the international market. The implications of this reported shift are substantial for the everyday individual who holds the central question for these holders is whether this marks the long-anticipated beginning of currency normalization and whether their years of patience may finally be reaching a turning point. Our report today aims to delve into the core facts of this situation, explain the mechanics of what is reportedly occurring within these major banks, and outline the suggested steps for note holders to take in response to this evolving landscape. Furthermore, we will examine how this new dynamic could potentially reshape the dinar standing as we look ahead to 2025. This information is critical for anyone with an interest in the Iraqi, as it represents a tangible move away from its previous status and into a more formal financial structure. The Iraqi dinar market has been characterized by a blend of speculation and genuine economic hope for well over a decade. The early 2000s saw a large number of international investors purchase, driven by the belief that Iraq's eventual economic recovery would lead to a revaluation of its currency, thereby substantially increasing the note's worth. However, as the years passed, major U.S. banks adopted a highly cautious, often outright resistant stance toward exchanging or processing the larger denominations, such as the 25,000 IQ bills. This reluctance was rooted in legitimate concerns regarding the authenticity of the notes, a notable lack of broad international trading demand, and the unpredictable nature of Iraq's internal monetary policies at the time. For an extended period, the dinar was primarily treated as a novelty or a collector's item, rather than a serious, actively tradable foreign currency. That long-standing perception is now being reported to be undergoing a dramatic reversal, with new information suggesting that these major U.S. banks are beginning to accept this policy evolution is taking the narrative in a significant new direction, which could influence how both the U.S. and the global financial markets perceive Iraq's currency in the future. The pivotal question is what specific changes have motivated this institutional shift. According to multiple reports citing internal bank updates and verified experiences from customers, a coordinated policy update appears to be underway. Wells Fargo, for instance, has reportedly initiated the Acceptance of denominations as large as the 5,000 note across several locations. In various U.S. states, actions that are being described as more than just isolated incidents or limited trials. The trend is not confined to a single institution. Chase Bank is also reported to have revised its foreign currency policies to be more inclusive of larger denom concurrently. Bank of America has reportedly started processing dinar transactions, albeit for existing customers who are able to satisfy certain specific requirements. This effectively means that individuals who were routinely turned away with the statement "we don't deal with dinar" are now in some cases being informed that the transaction can be processed. Such a coordinated change in institutional behavior suggests a deeper level of regulatory clarity, coordination among major players, and a possible increase in confidence in the overall stability and progression of Iraq's financial sector. Importantly, the rollout of this new acceptance began just within the last few months, potentially marking a pivotal moment for dinar holders throughout the country. A closer look at the reported procedures reveals a differentiated approach among the banks regarding the handling of these exchanges. At Wells Fargo, specific trained staff at certain branches are reportedly prepared to verify and process dinar notes. The verification process is said to involve a detailed inspection of the currency's advanced security features, including watermarks, color-shifting ink, and serial numbering, to ensure that the notes are authentic. Chase Bank, by contrast, is said to be taking a more geographically targeted approach, primarily focusing its efforts on branches located in states that have larger Middle Eastern communities. Their reported process often requires customers to schedule appointments in advance, a measure likely intended to ensure that each transaction is properly documented and secure within their system. Bank of America, as per the reports, has adopted the most cautious methodology, primarily offering currency exchanges to long-term customers with whom the bank already has a well-established relationship. It is crucial to note that these policy changes are not yet uniform or universal across every single branch of these institutions. However, the overarching trend being observed is a clear spreading and rapid movement toward increased acceptance. For many years, the idea of exchanging dinar at a major U.S. bank was considered practically impossible. Now, this is reportedly becoming a reality. It is essential to understand, however, that the acceptance of a currency by a bank is not automatically equivalent to a currency revaluation. There remains a significant distinction between exchanging a currency at its current market rate and the currency being formally revalued at a much higher predetermined rate. Nevertheless, the mere act of acceptance is a powerful signal of institutional confidence when large established financial institutions begin to treat a currency as a legitimate tradable asset, rather than a purely speculative novelty. It indicates a growing and fundamental trust in the economic stability of the issuing nation. In the context of Iraq, this is precisely the dynamic being described. The Central Bank of Iraq has been engaged in a prolonged and rigorous effort to modernize its banking infrastructure, significantly enhance security protocols, and make the dinar more readily accessible on international trading platforms. The reported policy updates at these major U.S. banks strongly suggest that these Iraqi efforts are beginning to yield tangible results, indicating that the Iraqi currency is slowly being into mainstream financial circulation and gaining recognition within key global financial systems. The underlying causes for this sudden and decisive shift are multifaceted. Firstly, Iraq's continued and successful economic reforms have been garnering significant international attention. The nation has successfully stabilized its crucial oil production, made substantial payments toward its foreign debt obligations, and consistently worked to strengthen its foreign currency reserves. Secondly, global financial institutions are reportedly demonstrating greater confidence in Iraq's regulatory systems, a sentiment that has been particularly boosted by the country's extensive enhancement of its anti-money laundering frameworks. Thirdly, as the world increasingly seeks out promising emerging markets for investment, Iraq has strategically positioned itself as a compelling potential economic growth story. Collectively, these favorable changes have made it significantly easier for major banks to internally justify the risks associated with dealing in the dinar. Furthermore, the general U.S. policy environment of late has reportedly encouraged a greater degree of openness toward foreign currencies that can demonstrate a legitimate demand for trade. When all of these elements, internal economic strength, regulatory confidence, emerging market potential, and a supportive policy the result is the cautious yet undeniable movement toward currency normalization that is currently being observed. For dinar holders who are closely monitoring this news, a crucial practical question is: how do I successfully exchange my notes? The first and most important step is to always contact your specific bank branch well in advance of any visit. It is highly advised not to simply walk into a branch with your notes, as processing policies vary considerably from one location to the next, and not all branches may be fully equipped or trained to handle these particular transactions, yet individuals will likely need to possess an existing bank account, present a valid form of identification, and in some specific instances be prepared to provide proof documenting the original source or acquisition of their data. These requirements are standard compliance measures primarily mandated by anti-money laundering laws and should not be viewed as personal or suspicious. Once the notes have been meticulously verified for authenticity, the banks are likely to process the exchange based on the current market exchange rate, which is distinct from any rumored or anticipated revaluation rate. Exchange rates are subject to daily fluctuations, meaning that the specific timing of the transaction can influence the final outcome. Some banks reportedly process small exchanges almost immediately, whereas larger amounts may require several business days to fully verify, clear, and process through the bank's Specialized foreign exchange departments. Examining the broader implications, the increased acceptance from major U.S. banks fundamentally signals a return to legitimacy for the Iraqi currency. For many years, the dinar existed within a kind of financial gray area. It was technically a real currency, but it was practically sidelined and difficult to trade. The current policy changes are altering this reality as banks begin to treat the dinar much like any other foreign currency. This development is expected to rekindle interest among more global investors, potentially leading to an increase in global liquidity for the dinar, which could over time positively influence its value. It also serves to strengthen Iraq's vital economic relationships with Western markets, a goal the Iraqi government has been actively and purposefully pursuing for years. Each new bank that formally adds the dinar to its list of accepted currencies represents a tangible step toward Iraq's full economic normalization. This is a progressive process rather than an instantaneous event, but the reports indicate that this process is unfolding more rapidly than many financial experts had initially foreseen. As with any significant financial news, real-world examples provide essential confirmation. Across several U.S. states, various dinar holders have successfully reported exchanging their notes over the past few weeks. 1 individual in Texas, for instance, reported successfully exchanging a 50,000 dinar amount at a Wells Fargo branch. The transaction reportedly took approximately 45 minutes with the notes successfully authenticated and the corresponding funds promptly deposited into their bank account. In Florida, multiple Chase Bank locations have been reported to process smaller exchanges for existing customers with no notable issues. These first-hand accounts are critically important because they validate that the deported policy shift is not merely theoretical. It is a real, measurable phenomenon that is currently taking place and spreading. However, it remains true that some individuals have been turned away, often due to uninformed staff or at branches that have not yet completed their training or policy roll out. This underscores the absolute necessity of prior verification and clear communication before any trip to the bank. The reported change is undeniably in motion, but its implementation across all locations remains a gradual unfolding process, shifting the perspective to the global economic context. Iraq has devoted the last several years to the substantial restructuring of its economy, following decades of internal instability with oil exports now stabilized and international trade partnerships continually expanding. The country has been diligently laying the essential groundwork for currency credibility. The reintroduction of dinar acceptance within major Western banks could be interpreted as one of the most powerful and concrete signals to date that Iraq's economy is entering a more mature and integrated phase. This development could also act as an encouragement for other countries and international financial bodies to recognize or trade the dinar more openly. In the long-term view, this widespread acceptance could significantly strengthen Iraq's overall financial position, help to attract much needed foreign direct investment, and ultimately improve international confidence in its national monetary system. In essence, the reported acceptance is viewed not only as positive news for individual dinar holders, but also as a strategic, financial and diplomatic win for the nation of Iraq itself. The recurring and central topic of the so-called revaluation or RV naturally resurfaces. With this news, many people are asking whether this reported bank acceptance means that the RV is imminent. The cautious and factual response is that it does not at this time automatically indicate an immediate revaluation. Reevaluations are complex, large-scale, macroeconomic events that are officially managed and controlled by the Central Bank of Iraq and are not determined by the policy decisions of U.S. commercial banks. What is currently being observed is an increase in acceptance, not a formal revaluation. However, it is essential to recognize that this growing institutional acceptance is a critical, foundational step that would make any future revaluation a more feasible and practical possibility. This acceptance can be viewed as the early stages of establishing the necessary infrastructure that would be required for any subsequent significant change in value. If Iraq continues to improve its economic output, successfully reduce domestic inflation, and solidify its international trade partnerships, a more valuable dinar in the future remains a realistic long-term outcome. However, the precise timing of any revaluation event remains completely uncertain, and no bank, investor, or analyst can accurately predict a specific date. In light of these developments, the key actions for dinar holders should center on preparation and maintaining patience. If an individual's local bank is part of this reported policy shift, they should dedicate time to verify precisely what is required for a transaction. It is highly advisable to keep the physical notes in pristine condition, clean, unfolded, and stored appropriately. Holders should be prepared with their valid identification and any supporting documents that can definitively prove the legitimacy of their original purchase. If the plan involves exchanging a large total amount, a prudent strategy may involve breaking the sum up into smaller transactions across various banks or over a period of time. It is crucial to maintain detailed records for tax purposes, as all currency exchanges, even those resulting in a small profit, are classified as taxable events in the United States. Above all, it is essential to avoid rushing into any exchange based purely on excitement or social media hype. The smartest course of action involves comparing the current exchange rates, confirming the specific bank policies, and making decisions that are informed and well considered. The most successful investors are consistently those who are able to effectively balance optimism for the future with a healthy degree of caution in the present. It is also important to briefly address the tax implications of these exchanges. When an individual exchanges foreign currency, any realized gain, even a modest one, it is considered a taxable event by the IRS. This means that any profit derived from the exchange could be potentially subject to either income tax or capital gains tax depending on the specifics of the holding period and amount. This reality makes it critically important to maintain detailed receipts and comprehensive bank records for every single transaction conducted. Some tax professionals suggest keeping both digital and paper copies of all relevant documentation for future reference. Furthermore, it is always a wise decision to consult with a qualified financial or tax advisor before undertaking any large-scale currency exchanges. The more prepared and organized an individual is, the smoother the entire process will ultimately be. This preparedness is particularly important in anticipation of any future evaluation, as tax rules could potentially change quickly, and having one's paperwork in perfect order will provide protection against unnecessary stress or potential financial penalties. At looking toward the broader financial landscape heading into 2025, Iraq's upcoming national budget, its strategies for oil pricing, and its international trade agreements are all factors that will exert a massive influence on the dinar's eventual value, with its foreign reserves continually increasing and financial transparency steadily improving. Iraq is actively and successfully regaining trust on the world stage. If this positive trajectory continues, it is plausible that an even greater number of us and international banks will begin to accept that this could lead to a global resurgence for a currency that was for a long time dismissed as financially unviable. Investors and analysts are currently watching the situation very closely, recognizing that every policy update, every new oil contract, and every strategic move by the Central Bank of Iraq adds a new piece to this complex financial puzzle. For the moment, the narrative is still actively being written, but it is becoming noticeably more optimistic with the passage of each month. It is also important to consider how this shift is impacting investor psychology within the dinar community. When major established banks begin the formal acceptance of a currency that has long been regarded as purely speculative, it profoundly alters the entire market narrative. It transforms what was once simply hope into a tangible level of credibility. For many years, skeptics consistently argued that the dinar would never again be accepted by major financial institutions. Yet, the current reality is that there is growing evidence suggesting that some of the largest banks in the United States are quietly, carefully, and officially processing these notes. This fundamental shift in market sentiment alone could serve to attract new investors, stimulate renewed discussions, and inject fresh energy into the market. It serves as a powerful reminder that significant financial progress, while sometimes slow, can fundamentally change everything when it finally arrives. As this evolving story continues to develop, it remains critically important for dinar holders to stay well informed, while maintaining a realistic and level-headed perspective. Holders should consistently follow official updates provided directly by their banks and pay close attention to official announcements from Iraq's central monetary authorities. They should actively steer clear of unverified social media rumors or any predictions that are exaggerated or lacking in evidence. The dinar market has historically been saturated with hype and speculation. But what is now reportedly occurring is a tangible, measurable shift in official banking policy. The focus should remain strictly on the facts, not on fantasies. Individuals should monitor global oil markets, follow the progress of Iraq's comprehensive economic reforms, and track how other international banks respond in the coming months. The better informed an individual is, the better positioned they will be when the next major phase of this story ultimately unfolds. The global economic timing of this particular shift should not be overlooked. The world is presently entering a new phase of monetary diversification where many countries are actively rebalancing their currency dependencies and seeking out alternative trade partners. Within this complex environment, Iraq's return to the global conversation is likely not coincidental. It is a strategic maneuver with its vast oil reserves, significant mineral deposits, and an emerging technology sector. Iraq possesses the fundamental potential to establish itself as a serious and powerful regional economic player. The growing acceptance of the dinar by Western banks is an accelerant for this broader vision. For the U.S. banks involved, it is also a commercially smart move, allowing them to offer new currency exchange opportunities and expand their services into promising emerging markets. In the short and medium term, virtually everyone stands to gain if this process of normalization continues to proceed smoothly and successfully. In summarizing today's detailed report, the reported acceptance of the Iraqi dinar by major institutions like Wells Fargo, Chase, and Bank of America marks what can be considered a historic milestone in a financial saga that has spanned almost 2 full decades. While this is certainly not the final chapter, it represents one of the most significant steps yet taken. This institutional change demonstrates that confidence in Iraq's currency is demonstrably and slowly, steadily, and surely for all current dinar holders. The present time calls for alertness, a degree of caution, and an informed, measured optimism. If this detailed update has been helpful, we encourage you to follow for our next report and share this information with anyone who holds the Iraqi, as this is the kind of factual clarity that truly matters in this complex market. Until next time, this is Iraqi Dinar. Latest news bringing you the clarity, facts, and updates you can trust. Stay smart, stay thoroughly prepared, and continue watching for what could become one of the most substantial financial turnarounds of our time. Iraqi Dinar latest news. October 24th, 4 years. The Iraqi dinar has been a beacon of speculation and enduring hope for millions of note holders globally. This large community of investors who initially acquired the currency in the wake of the early 2000s has been patiently awaiting a moment of formal financial recognition that could validate their long-term position. A potentially transformative development is now being reported across the United States, suggesting a fundamental shift in the operational stance of the world's leading financial institutions toward. The initial reports indicate that major U.S. banks including Wells Fargo, Chase, and Bank of America are beginning to formalize procedures for the acceptance and processing of Iraqi Dinar notes, specifically citing the widely circulated 25,000 denomination. This is being presented not as an unconfirmed rumor or an insignificant trial program, but as a real documented change in how these powerful institutions are officially handling a currency that has long been a subject of global financial controversy. This reported institutional change carries substantial implications for individual dinar holders who have invested their capital in time over the years. The central question resonating across this investor base is whether this new level of acceptance finally signals the start of currency normalization, potentially marking the long-awaited turning point for their financial outlook. Our comprehensive report today is dedicated to uncovering the factual core of this dramatic shift, providing a detailed explanation of the internal mechanisms reportedly at play within these major banks and outlining the recommended practical steps that note holders should take in response to this rapidly evolving financial landscape. Furthermore, we will analyze how this reported trend could reshape the long-term standing of the DNR as the global market moves into 2025. This timely information is essential for anyone with an investment in the Iraqi, as it suggests a tangible progression away from its previous status as a sideline novelty and toward a more integrated position in the mainstream financial system. The Iraqi dinar market has been a tumultuous blend of deep economic optimism and frustrating stagnation for well over a decade. A significant number of investors purchased dinar following the early 2000s conflict, operating on the premise that a stable, oil-rich Iraq would eventually restore its economy and revalue its currency, thereby generating substantial returns on their banknote holdings. However, in the intervening years, major financial institutions in the U.S. became increasingly cautious, often outright refusing to process or exchange the higher denomination notes, like the 25,000 IQD bill. This reluctance was a result of clear and pressing concerns, including the difficulty of verifying note authenticity, a pronounced lack of genuine international trading demand, and the consistent unpredictability of Iraq's monetary policy decisions. Consequently, the dinar was often relegated to the status of a collector's item rather than being treated as a serious internationally tradable currency with recognized liquidity. That long-held perception, however, is now reported to be undergoing a fundamental and dramatic reversal, spurred by new information confirming that key U.S. banks are reportedly initiating dinar acceptance. This procedural shift is setting a powerful new trajectory for the currency, one that could profoundly influence the way both the USA and the broader global financial community view the Iraqi dinar moving forward. 2. Understand the gravity of this moment. It is necessary to examine what specific institutional changes have precipitated this move. Verified customer experiences. Corroborated by credible internal update suggests that a coordinated policy revision is taking hold. Wells Fargo, for instance, has reportedly begun accepting DEN denominations, including the 5,000 note, at locations in several U.S. states, an action that is being presented as part of a systemic change rather than a series of isolated or localized experiments. The momentum of this shift is not confined to a single bank. Chase Bank is also reported to have updated its foreign currency protocols to include larger dinar. Simultaneously, Bank of America has reportedly initiated the processing of dinar transactions, though it is primarily focusing on existing long-term customers who meet a specific set of established requirements. This change implies a clear institutional transition. Individuals who were previously met with an immediate refusal, "We don't deal with DNR," are now, in certain circumstances, being informed that the processing of their currency is possible. Such synchronized movement across major banking competitors suggests a deeper level of shared regulatory clarity, corporate coordination, and critically a newly established confidence in the long-term stability and direction of Iraq's financial framework. This entire process, importantly, is reported to have gained significant momentum only within the last few months, signaling a potentially pivotal change for dinar holders throughout the United States. Upon examining the reported handling of these new exchanges, distinct procedures are evident across the involved institutions. Wells Fargo, according to customer reports, has designated and trained staff at specific branches who are now equipped to verify and process the dinar notes. This verification protocol reportedly involves the meticulous inspection of advanced security features embedded in the notes, such as watermarks, color-shifting ink elements, and the sequencing of the serial numbering, all conducted to confirm authenticity and prevent fraud. Chase Bank is reportedly employing a more selective approach, strategically concentrating its dinar acceptance on branches located within states that have established and sizable Middle Eastern communities. Their documented process often involves customer scheduling appointments in advance, a measure likely implemented to ensure that the transactions are securely and properly managed and fully documented. A Bank of America, based on the reports, has adopted a more cautious and conservative posture, offering exchange services predominantly to clients who have a history with the bank and have met specific long-standing relationship criteria. It must be clearly stated that these new policies are not yet fully implemented across every single branch of these financial institutions, meaning that a uniform experience is not guaranteed everywhere. However, the overarching and undeniable trend being observed is a clear spreading and quick acceleration toward formal acceptance. For many years, the notion of exchanging dinar at a major U.S. bank was considered an impossibility. But this is now reportedly transitioning into a reality. It is essential to continuously Reiterate that a bank's acceptance of a currency does not equate to an automatic revaluation. The act of exchanging currency at the prevailing market rate is distinct from the national central bank formally revaluing the currency to a significantly higher predetermined rate. Not yet. Despite this technical distinction, the reported fact of institutional acceptance provides a powerful and fundamental confidence signal when globally influential financial institutions begin to treat a currency as a legitimate tradable financial instrument rather than a speculative asset. It demonstrates a growing and significant trust in the national economy's long-term stability. This is precisely the dynamic being described in the context of Iraq. The Central Bank of Iraq has been engaged in rigorous multi-year campaigns to modernize its entire banking sector, enhance currency security features, and actively promote the dinar's accessibility on international platforms. These reported policy changes in U.S. banks strongly suggest that Iraq's efforts are finally registering in the international financial system, indicating that the currency is slowly but surely being integrated back into mainstream circulation and formally recognized by major global monetary systems. About the confluence of factors driving this sudden procedural shift is multifaceted and strategic. Firstly, Iraq's ongoing economic reforms have successfully captured the attention of the international community. The country has achieved stabilization in its vital oil production sector, successfully paid down portions of its external foreign debt, and consistently focused on strengthening its foreign currency reserves. Secondly, global financial institutions are reportedly expressing greater confidence in Iraq's strengthened regulatory oversight. A trust specifically bolstered by the nation's enhanced anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing frameworks. Thirdly, as the global market actively seeks out new high potential emerging markets, Iraq has strategically positioned its economy as a compelling growth story for the immediate future. These collective positive developments have made it considerably easier for banks to justify the inherent risks associated with dealing in the dinar. Furthermore, the general political and economic environment in the U.S. has recently favored greater openness toward foreign currencies that can demonstrate verifiable legitimate trade demand when these complex elements: internal economic strength, heightened regulatory compliance, viable emerging market status, and a conducive policy and viable progression toward currency normalization that is now being observed. For dinar holders processing this information, the practical challenge of how do I exchange my notes becomes paramount. The single most important step is to proactively contact your specific bank branch by phone ahead of time. It is strongly advised not to simply arrive at the bank with the notes, as internal policies can differ significantly between branches and not every single location may be fully trained or equipped to handle these specialized foreign currency transactions at this time. Individuals seeking an exchange will most likely be required to have an existing bank Account present a valid form of official identification and in certain situations provide supporting documentation to establish the legitimate source of their DNR acquisition. These requirements are standard operating procedure designed to ensure compliance with stringent anti-money laundering regulations and should not be perceived as suspicious or overly personalized. Once the notes are successfully verified for authenticity, the banks are expected to process the exchange at the current floating market rate, which is entirely separate from any unconfirmed revaluation rumors. Because exchange rates fluctuate on a daily basis, the specific timing of the transaction can directly influence the final US dollar amount received. Some branches may process small verifiable exchanges immediately, while larger transaction amounts may require several business days for full verification and clearance through the foreign exchange departments. That from a broader market perspective, the increased acceptance by major U.S. banks is a powerful signal of the Iraqi currency's return to legitimacy. For many years, the dinar existed in a perpetual state of financial limbo. Technically a real currency, but practically excluded from most international banking functions. This is now changing as major banks begin to treat it in a manner similar to any other legitimate foreign currency. This development is expected to renew significant interest among a wider group of global investors, which could lead to an increase in global liquidity for the dinar, potentially boosting its trading value over a sustained period of time. This institutional acceptance also strategically reinforces Iraq's economic relationship with powerful Western markets, a diplomatic and financial goal that the Iraqi government has been vigorously pursuing for several years. Each individual bank that formally integrates the dinar into its list of accepted currencies represents another measurable and concrete step toward the full economic normalization of Iraq. This is an evolutionary process, not a singular instantaneous event. But the current reports suggest that this evolution is progressing more rapidly than many financial commentators had previously anticipated. As is common with all significant market news, real world examples provide essential verification. Reports from several U.S. states confirm that dinar holders have successfully exchanged notes in the past few weeks. One confirmed report from a Texas individual detailed the successful exchange of 50,000 dinar at a Wells Fargo branch, noting that the entire process, including authentication, took approximately 45 minutes before the funds were securely deposited. Furthermore, reports from Florida indicate that multiple Chase locations have successfully processed smaller exchanges for account holders without any reported complications. These confirmed success stories are vital because they provide tangible evidence that the reported policy shift is moving beyond the theoretical realm and is actively happening now, spreading quickly across various regions. However, it is also important to acknowledge that some individuals still report being turned away, often due to encounters with uninformed staff or at branches that have not yet fully rolled out the new training protocols. This mixed experience underscores the critical Importance of prior verification and clearing communication before attempting any in-person transaction. While the institutional change is clearly underway, its consistent universal application is being introduced gradually. Considering this from a macroeconomic perspective, Iraq has spent the last decade tirelessly restructuring its national economy, following prolonged periods of internal instability. With its oil exports stabilized and a widening network of international trade partnerships, the nation has been quietly and effectively laying the necessary foundation for currency credibility. The reintroduction of dinar acceptance within prominent Western banks can be interpreted as one of the most compelling external signals. Yet that Iraq's economy is reaching a new level of financial maturity. This development could in turn encourage other countries and major international trading partners to recognize or actively trade the dinar more openly in their own markets. In the long-term context, this growing acceptance has the potential to significantly reinforce Iraq's overall financial position, serve as a magnet for increased foreign investment, and ultimately improve the international community's confidence in the stability of its monetary system. In short, the reported bank acceptance is being viewed not just as favorable news for individual currency holders, but as a strategic economic victory for the nation of Iraq as a whole. The persistent and frequently asked question regarding the so-called revaluation or RV must be addressed with factual clarity. Many people are wondering if this bank news means the highly anticipated RV is about to happen. The factual and honest answer remains not necessarily and not yet a currency. Revaluation is a complex macroeconomic decision that is made and controlled exclusively by the Central Bank of Iraq, not by the commercial policies of U.S. banks. What is currently being observed is a significant increase in institutional acceptance, which is distinct from a formal revaluation event. However, this acceptance is an absolutely crucial foundation that would be required to make any future revaluation a feasible and successful monetary transition. It should be viewed as the early infrastructural groundwork being laid for what could potentially come later. If Iraq can maintain its current trajectory of improving its economic output, successfully reducing inflation and continuing to strengthen its key trade partnerships, a DNR with a more valuable future exchange rate remains a realistic long-term outcome. Nevertheless, the precise timing of any such revaluation event remains completely unknown and cannot be accurately predicted by any bank, investor, or financial analyst. Therefore, the recommended course of action for dinar holders must be centered on disciplined preparation and continued patience. If an individual's local bank is participating in this new policy, they should take the time to thoroughly verify all necessary requirements. It is essential to keep all physical notes in excellent condition, clean, free of folds, and stored securely. Holders must be prepared with their valid identification and any supporting documentation that legally proves the legitimate acquisition of their For those planning to exchange a substantial total amount, a strategic consideration may be to divide the exchange into multiple smaller transactions or utilize several different bank locations. It is imperative to meticulously maintain detailed records for tax compliance, as all currency exchanges resulting in a profit are considered taxable events in the U.S. subject to capital gains or income tax. Crucially, investors must avoid making rushed decisions based solely on excitement or unsubstantiated rumors. The smartest strategy involves diligently comparing current exchange rates, confirming all specific bank policies, and making decisions that are informed by fact. The most effective investors consistently demonstrate an ability to balance long-term optimism with a healthy degree of short-term caution. A brief discussion on the tax implications is also vital. When any foreign currency is exchanged, any realized profit is considered a taxable gain by the IRS. This means that any increase in value realized from the exchange could be subject to either capital gains tax or ordinary income tax rates. This financial reality necessitates the meticulous retention of all original receipts and detailed bank records for every single transaction. Many tax experts advise keeping both digital and physical copies of all paperwork for long-term protection. Furthermore, it is always a prudent step to consult with a professional financial advisor or tax specialist before executing any large-scale currency exchanges. The higher the level of preparedness and organization, the smoother the entire transaction process will be. This counsel is particularly relevant in the event of a future revaluation, as having all tax paperwork properly in order will provide a necessary safeguard against undue stress or potential IRS penalties. Looking forward toward the critical period of 2025, Iraq's upcoming national budget, its strategies for oil pricing, and the negotiation of new international trade agreements will all be major factors in shaping the dinar trajectory. With its increasing foreign reserves and marked improvements in financial transparency, Iraq is steadily rebuilding its credibility on the global stage. If this positive trend continues uninterrupted, it is highly likely that an even greater number of us and international banks will begin to formally accept the deal. The vision of a global return for a currency that was once written off as a financial impossibility is a compelling prospect that investors are now actively watching. Every new policy update, every major oil contract, and every strategic announcement from the Central Bank of Iraq adds a new element to this developing narrative for the immediate future. The story remains optimistic and is being revised with every passing month. Finally, the impact of this change on investor psychology is profound. When official established banks begin to accept a currency that has long been classified as purely speculative, it fundamentally transforms the narrative from one of uncertain hope to one of tangible credibility. For many years, market skeptics confidently declared that the dinar would never again gain acceptance from major financial institutions. Yet today, Factual evidence suggests that some of the largest banks in the United States are quietly, carefully, and officially processing these notes. This powerful shift in sentiment alone has the potential to attract new institutional and individual investors, spark new market discussions, and inject renewed energy into the dinar market. It serves as a clear reminder that progress, while often slow and deliberate, has the capacity to fundamentally alter all previous market expectations when it eventually materializes. As this complex story continues to unfold, it is essential for all dinar holders to remain well-informed, level-headed, and realistic in their expectations. Holders should prioritize following official policy updates directly from their banks and credible announcements from the Iraqi central authorities while strictly avoiding social media speculation or exaggerated unverified predictions. The dinar market has always been prone to intense hype. But the changes currently being reported are tangible, measurable shifts in official banking policy. Investors should focus strictly on the facts, not on fantasies. Monitor the oil markets, follow the progress of Iraq's comprehensive economic reforms, and track how other global banks respond in the coming months. The better informed you are, the more effectively you will be positioned to respond when the next phase of this financial story inevitably breaks. This is Iraqi Dinar latest news, providing you with clarity, facts, and updates you can trust. Stay smart, stay prepared, and keep watching.